Excellent. Welcome to those of you joining us in this live stream. My name is Chris Mosier. I'm a producer with LinkedIn, and I am joined to my left by someone who may be familiar to you. The person to my left, the founder of Process Mentors, a man who has been a leader, thought leader, as well as a great support to the community around discipline Agile for more than 10 years now. Someone who is an ATP with PMI and has been delivering great value, teaching and delivering insights for organizations. To my left, Joshua Barnes. Joshua, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, happy to be here. Little bit different look and feel to where we're streaming from today. I'm normally in my office, and today I'm in a much different location.
Indeed, yes. So thank you very much for Joshua for allowing us to have his live stream and to have him hosted here. So we are on the set, LinkedIn Studios in California, where Joshua has just wrapped up recording his most recent course of now 5 or 6 courses with LinkedIn Learning.
Yes, it's the 5th one.
Yes. So we thought we would take this opportunity here this afternoon, this morning, or if you're joining us via replay, but we take this time just to speak a little bit about some of the content that we're working on in the course to be able to extend. He goes into great depth of these conversations around hybrid project management inside the course, but because we have you here in studio, you're very gracious enough to kind of answer a couple of questions and let us speak about the topic.
Yeah, so the topic of our discussion today, as well as the course, is hybrid approaches, and that's the combining of predictive and agile methods. And we're seeing that, this is something that's not new, it's been around for quite some time, but we're seeing a trend that people are embracing hybrids a lot more. And that's really for a number of reasons, right? Sometimes it's the one-size-fits-all sort of prescription isn't working. We've got a lot of complexity in our work these days. We've got lots of different sort of situations that teams and organizations are in. And hybrids are a way to really make sure that your approach, your way of working, is fit for purpose. And one of the ties into Discipline Agile, as well as lots of other sources of Agile and Lean content, is that we're trying to look at what is going to be a benefit to you. What are the things that for your team, your level of experience, the type of work that you're doing, the culture in your organization, the level of support, empowerment, and so on, you can make better informed decisions around how to create an approach that's really going to help you deliver value better.
Could you help you do such an excellent job of kind of creating a visual picture to describe, like, as I have seen your courses, learned from you, seen you present at PMI events and conferences, I'm interested to see if you have a visual metaphor that kind of paints the picture of this hybrid project management space.
Yeah, and so if you think about where Chris and I are sitting right now, right? So if Chris is agile, right? So he's an agile way of working, and he's over to my right, and I'm predictive, and I'm over here to his left. Then the span between us is what we're talking about, is hybrid approaches where we're going to be maybe mostly traditional or predictive or waterfall or whatever we want to call it, which is on the end of the point of the scale or the spectrum that I'm on. And maybe I want to do a few agile practices. Maybe I'm not in a position where the organization I'm at is moving to a more modern approach or an agile or lean approach. But I'm interested to see if I can do a little bit versus maybe I'm much closer over here to Chris, right? So now on this distance, right, I've just closed it up the spectrum. I'm much closer. Maybe I'm using mostly an agile way of working, but there are still some things that maybe are a little bit kind of left over from more of a traditional standpoint. Maybe we're not getting all of our work started and completed in a time box like a sprint or an iteration. So we have a little bit farther to go, but that's it. And the span between us, right? If this was a ruler and the little graduations on it, right? I mean, there's thousands of agile and lean practices. So each little change in a practice or how we're using it is really a little step further one way or the other.
Thank you very much for that. When I think of past organizations that I've been a part of, I'm sure for the audience, for those folks that they reflect on their own organization now or their past work experience, it's very rare that it's a kind of a wholesale where it is just a pure kind of Scrum environment, or it is a pure Agile way of working, or it is a 100% kind of pure waterfall or predictive approach. I'm interested in your experience working and coaching with organizations. Do you often see the transformation or the movement to adopt Agile ways of working? Do you find that to be something that is done piecemeal, or that's done kind of by a small team? Or is it typically done more strategically at an organizational level?
So, so I'm gonna, as a consultant, I'm gonna say it depends.
Yeah.
Right. It depends on the context. First, what Chris had mentioned is yes. I mean, even if you're using a framework, a more prescribed approach, you are going to have to augment that. And Scrum, the Scrum Guide, right? For those of you that use Scrum, you very well know this, right? There are gaps that you need to fill based on your situation, and again, you got to figure out how to do that. So almost everything's kind of a hybrid when you look at it in that lens. Now, as far as is it a big, gigantic leap? Is it's like, hey, we're just going to flip a switch and we're going to move from our existing way of working, whatever that is, to this Agile approach? Yeah, there is a desire with some organizations over the past probably 2 decades now, where that will be an initiative, right? There's funding, there's people that are brought in, there's going to be Agile coaches, and if you're adopting Scrum, Scrum masters, lots of training, and so a pretty significant investment to try to make a more swift move to Agile. For some organizations that's worked. For other organizations it hasn't, right? And that's why we see a lot of change fatigue with people in organizations, that it's like, oh, here we go again. This is like the second time, the third time, the fifth time that we have tried to be moving to this Agile thing. And for a lot of reasons, we might not get to what a purist might see as Agile. And that's the last part that I wanted to kind of answer to Chris's question is, there are times where we will find, for lots of reasons, Agile coaches or people that have been working in the Agile space, and they are very much of a purist, and it's almost like there's a line in the sand. And it's like, this is the gold standard, and if you haven't gotten there, you're not doing Agile, or you're not doing Scrum, or you're not doing whatever. And then there's the more realist or more pragmatic, that the goal is not to be able to say we are a perfect Scrum team or we're a perfect Agile team. It's never, and never should be, about that. It's about delivering value, right? That we're at organizations, and whether you're a for-profit, for-profit, you've got customers, you're a non-for-profit, you've got members, you're a government agency. We're trying to deliver value. That's why we do the work that we're doing. So how do we do that better and more efficiently? And some of that ties into just, again, how we approach getting things done. Some of it is just the interaction between team members and other people in the organization. But that is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to make a better environment and use better approaches and continuously improve to deliver that value better, and come in and enjoy doing it.
Kind of bridging off of that, I have worked in organizations where some of my coworkers might have come from an organization that was based in Scrum or another Agile way of working, and I can find sometimes in those instances of those folks joining in, there was a judgment made about the organization, which would be to say, like, oh, because you were doing hybrid, you're doing a little bit of predictive and waterfall, you're doing a little bit of Agile, that would be considered like bad or frowned upon, that it's not kind of a pure implementation of a particular framework on that side. As you kind of speak to that idea, I very much appreciate you saying, like, the goal is to deliver this value. As you kind of help organizations, I imagine, help organizations kind of reframe that, of kind of, as opposed to that judgment, do you see, or how do you kind of address discussions that might arise in an organization where there is judgment about the fidelity of an implementation?
Yeah, and so both with coming in and doing consulting services for organizations, and I also do a fair amount of agility health checks and assessments, and I like doing that type of work as well. And so it's all about perspective. So let's take one example or one scenario where we have an organization that has invested significantly to move to an Agile way of working, right? We could pick whatever that's going to mean. And so again, we've brought people in, we've got consultants, we've put people through training, we've got lots of people within the organization that we've involved. Maybe we need to take a look at our governance approach. We need to take a look at how teams are formed. There are two overarching requirements, at least in my experience, that you have to be able to move to an agile way of working. For one is you need a cross-functional team. You got to be able to take, from a predictive approach where we've got phases, and so you have, a lot of analysts that are working together in the requirements phase, and you got, developers that are doing all the coding, the analysis and design work in the development phase, and so forth. We need those people to all be working together at the same time, and we need the requirements broken down or decomposed into something small enough we can start and finish in a really small span of time, like 2 weeks. That's a typical length of a sprint or an iteration. So we're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money to be able to do that. And then we end up with what's called Scrum Fall or Water Scrum Fall or Agile in name only. And we still haven't made it to this beneficial point or getting the full benefits of Agile where we're getting that fast feedback. We're starting and finishing things, again, in very small time increments to be able to build on it, know we're going in the right direction. So yes, if we're looking at that and there's been a coordinated, well-funded effort, that's not great. However, again, to flip the perspective, let's say now we've got another organization, so this is scenario number 2, and what we have is we have more of that grassroots effort. It's like, hey, we've got a project manager, we've got some team members that are like, yeah, we're doing a more traditional approach, but we want to adopt some of the things that we've seen from Agile. Or we've got somebody that comes in with some experience at another organization. They're like, hey, we did this and it worked really well. So over time, you're moving along. Again, we're closing the gap, the spectrum between Chris and I. Again, I'm Predictive, he's Agile. And now you're getting to the point where maybe you are in that water scrum fall. But you've done it on your own. You've done it through experience. You've done it through some of the buy-in you've been able to get in the organization. You've been able to get the capacity of the people that are needed to be, again, more of that cross-functional team. And that is a positive thing. But you see, I run into a lot of, again, more of the purist mindset that says, yeah, but that's still really bad. Well, again, is it? If you've been able to get there kind of on your own? I don't think it is. I think it's maybe much more beneficial, and if value's being delivered more predictably, if the team members are enjoying their work and they're not dealing with a lot of drag and impediments and just those pain points that we feel, it's just, hey, this isn't really working well for us. I'd say that's much better. And again, you can always continuously improve, and at some point, if it's the right thing for you and your organization, you can get there. And again, you're doing what a more purist would recognize as Agile. But it's still good if you're not.
I've enjoyed from our conversations, and the talks that you've done, the notion of kind of fit for purpose ways of working. That you're looking at kind of how you deliver that value, how the organization delivers that value, how the team members feel about the work they're doing. And that becomes kind of the goal, or that becomes the North Star that folks move to.
Yeah, so there's something that we typically cover in some of our training we do, and there's like this single loop learning and double loop learning. And single loop learning is that you might have a prescribed set of things that you're going to do, right? Your checklist, your framework you're following, and you always do that, right? You always do it no matter what. And then you take a look at other stuff that you're trying to maybe do an addition from a process standpoint, and that's where you make your improvements. Double loop learning is where you challenge everything, right? And that's much more of my consulting style and the company that I founded. I mean, that's kind of our collective mindset is we want to make sure that outside of introducing unnecessary risk or violating something that's like governance or compliance, or I mean, just the stuff that we have to do regardless of if we feel it's the most efficient way because there's a more important reason why we're doing it. Outside of that types of things, we want to make sure that our approach for our work, each team is unique, each experience we've got is unique, the quantity of work we're doing is unique, especially when we're talking about knowledge work, right? It's different in manufacturing where it is a much more repeatable process. We're doing the same thing over and over and we're just trying to tweak it. With knowledge work, each scope of work, each project, each new set of capabilities or enhancements we're doing is different. And what we did last time may or may not work for us this time, and we need to recognize that. And so that's a really big part also of what's tied into the idea of a hybrid approach is we're always balancing what's going to benefit us.
You got to speak. I think of coming into an organization, say that I am a person, and many members of the audience might be folks who have experience in agile ways of working and are coming into an organization that might be more predictive or have more waterfall. Now, without casting judgment as to the processes, but that person that comes in has a fresh set of eyes to see the organization, and in so doing, coming into that organization might see opportunities for kind of small wins to convert folks or to have folks kind of recognize some of the value in moving into agile ways of working. In the course, you speak a little to those ways that someone who has experience with these agile ways of working could come in. And I'm interested if you could share a little bit about the areas, either the practices or the areas within the phases of a project that someone who has experience in agile ways of working could introduce those concepts.
Yeah. So first, in everything Chris just said, what I'd like to just sort of emphasize a little bit is that if you are an experienced Agile practitioner and you're coming in, whether you're going to be a team member or you're going to be in some other capacity, project manager or some type of a coach or whatever, regardless, have that open mindset, right? You might not be in a position where you're going to be able to come in and bring that team or bring that organization all the way over to an agile way of working. So what you want to be able to do is bring in the practices or techniques based on the context that you're now in that are going to be most beneficial and be able to be something you can actually put into action and get value out of. One of the things that I do cover in this new course is just that first little step forward if you are in an environment that is doing, again, a more traditional or predictive-based approach. There are things that you can do like using a Kanban board, right? Visualizing your workflow and bringing complete visibility and transparency into what you're doing, what's in process, what's blocked, what's been done. So there's a number of practices that I consider to be those that are more high impact, that these are things that just most teams, maybe not every team, but most teams would get benefit from. And there's typically a relatively low effort to put those in place, as well as it's not going to, again, create a conflict between your existing ways of working and, phases and phase gates and so forth. So possibly doing a daily stand-up or something where maybe 2-3 times a week, whatever the right frequency is, that you are getting together and coordinating what's going on and what's going to potentially be starting next. You can center that around using a Kanban board. You can look at how you're taking more consideration to your downstream team members. Again, if you're using a phase gated approach and you're in the requirements phase or or even in, a little bit before that, the planning phase, people are going to take that work in the development phase and in the testing phase and so forth. So maybe having something that gets close to like a definition of ready. What are the things that we need to agree on, some of those team agreements, or also known as team norms, that we can establish, and it just improves some of those handoffs that are going to happen in that type of an approach.
I think of kind of Winston Churchill's, which I'm paraphrasing, of kind of never letting a good emergency go to waste. As you speak of kind of that phase gate, and especially the planning stages, the requirement stages of a project, it seems as though uncertainty, risk, those sorts of factors are places where Agile kind of excels in addressing or at the very least in kind of working with versus a more predictive approach where some of that uncertainty or risk might not be discovered until much later in a phase gate, or the documentation might be so onerous at the top. Could you speak a little to the opportunity that's provided to introducing some Agile ways of working into those kind of earlier states of a phase gate?
Yeah. So one of the examples that comes to mind is, let's say that you're in the planning phase and we've got a sizable quantity of work. So again, a lot of times we see these projects that are still many months, 6 months, 7, 8 months, maybe a little bit longer, that are right, that still happen, right? So it's not like everything is the minimum we can do these days. And we're in the planning phase, and we are posed with some questions around a change in maybe the technology we're using. Maybe there's some new, more modern technology that could potentially be introduced, but we wouldn't be doing that until much later in the project timeline, for instance, in the development phase. So what we could do is we could form a small team, right, almost like a small agile team during the planning phase to do like a proof of technology or a proof of concept to be able to evaluate which direction we might go, to be able to understand that if we waited until we got to the development phase, well, we'd have an impact on requirements, an impact on expectations that have been set or established and that we're having to manage to. We might have a whole lot more risk, a lot of rework and scrap, so a lot of waste that's going on. So depending on where we're at in the timeline, we might use some of those approaches very early on, and then once we've mitigated that risk, we're able to then just continue on with more of, not more of, but the traditional approach or the phase-gated approach that again might be mandated or just what we're using at the organization. We have, some other scenarios. You might have your developers. Maybe they're a little bit more experienced with using an agile way of working, using something like Scrum, and they're like, hey, we want to develop, do our work. We want to approach the way we're going to do development using sprints, right? So doing that is going to almost always, not always, but almost always, bring a benefit because we're going to see them chunk the work up in a way where they can get things done, they can do different types of testing or different types of integration than they would with a longer timeline that we would see in just, again, more of that traditional approach. We're going to see opportunities for feedback sooner. So those are some of the scenarios that I cover in the course where we've got lots of opportunities to see if using Agile in ways that maybe you haven't considered before, or you're just a little bit uncomfortable with even the idea of it. But it can work.
As teams move, as an organization moves from more predictive or waterfall-based approaches into more agile ways of working, the team and the makeup of a team, the definition of the roles within a team can also change, shift, evolve as you kind of move on that spectrum. As you in this course are kind of looking to these hybrid ways and kind of speaking to different states that an organization might find itself on that, do you find that organizations struggle with that evolution of that definition of a team? And what have you seen around kind of successful ways for, at a strategic level, at an organizational level, to kind of think of teams and to work with teams as they transition across those different definitions of ways of working?
Yeah, so one of the things that's really important in my experience is that we have to understand what good looks like. And if we're moving to a new way of working, whether it is a very coordinated, funded initiative, or it's just something we've got approval and there's buy-in to start making some small steps forward, we have to understand what good should look like. Now, again, one of the things ultimately is the value that we're delivering. And we might be looking at specific things from a team perspective, like we want to be able to eliminate work going forwards and backwards, right? So you hand off work, which, unless you're a single person maybe developing an app in your garage, we're gonna have handoffs, right? But what we want to see is, are we seeing work going backwards? Is it a hand back? So we've got some of those types of considerations where it might be defects, it might be just we have a lot of uncompleted work, we've got a lot of work in process, we have a lot of unplanned work, so we might have a longer timeline because we have a project that's really big, and so we still have some unplanned, some pushed work on us. So those are some considerations. The other thing that is also equally as important, again, in my experience, is we have to take a look at the more subjective things. How is the team coming together and moving towards a different way of working? Do they feel better about it? Again, I like to describe like drag, right? The kind of walking through water, walking on the beach where you're walking through water and through, loose sand. It's that feeling of just every day you're coming in and it's something that just is a little bit of, arduous, or it's drudgery. Those are some of the things we need to also be focusing on. And it could be something as simple as creating team norms, creating some agreements of how we as a team are going to work better together. And again, I'll go back to the traditional or predictive team. You're kind of a team of analysts in the requirements phase. You're like a team of developers in the development phase. It's very different as you're moving more to the right, again, closing the gap between Chris and I, and we're moving more towards an agile approach. Analysts and developers and testers and any other role that's needed, you're working together daily, right? Hourly, minutely, as a team. And we need to be able to figure out what are the things that we can do that improve how we work as a team, and ultimately, again, being happy coming into work and the value that we're delivering.
So it's both kind of the quantitative, those metrics that are measuring what good looks like to the organization, how value is being delivered, the quantity of that value, but then there's that qualitative.
Yes, absolutely. And it's the qualitative that I find often is lacking, or we have all these quantitative metrics, and we have lots of metrics that come out of the agile space, right? And it's like we're just going to have these 10 metrics, these 15 metrics. It's way too much, right? There are things that we need to focus in on. And so is from more of an overarching organizational perspective, and why we might be evolving and improving our ways of working, is it to decrease time to market? Is it because we want to increase the speed of feedback that we're getting? Is it because we know we have a lot of work in process? So people are busy, they're doing stuff, but nothing's getting completed on a regular basis. So we want to take a look at those more overarching things that leadership should really be interested in, and metrics that feed up to that. But the right types of metrics, so we know we're making progress there, but we're also balancing that more qualitative side of it as well. And that'll be different for each team, the qualitative side.
Yeah. Like I enjoy so much your kind of look at this, the perspective on it, having been a part of agile transformations in the past. I'm sure folks viewing have also been a part of those, that there can be kind of an adherence to, we have set this destination, we are moving to this destination, and it might be without necessarily servicing these metrics, or kind of that notion of ideally this is coming back to a product that's being created, to a service that's being delivered to a customer, and then being able to kind of walk backwards from that to see, like, how are we doing in service of the value that we're delivering, versus that we just have set this kind of flag in this space, and we just need to reach that flag.
Yeah, I like to use the visual for the mental picture of, right, like a flag at the top of the mountain, right? And like, we're getting there. It's like, we are going to be agile. Like, go be agile. And again, that should never be the goal, right? It's and sometimes, and I is a consulting company, we've come in to support organizations that are also sort of in flight with their transformations, and it's almost like there's like a checklist. It's like, has everybody gone through training, right? Is everybody agile? And that's not what we should be focused on. And that's one of the first things that I try to make some inroads in with the leadership and the management team, is that what are the things that are going to make a difference, right? And that's what you should be measuring to. It's this idea of, there is no end state. The end state isn't, okay, you've got a 2-year long initiative, everybody's going to adopt framework XYZ, and boom, that's the flag up on the mountain. And it's also never going to be, again, in my experience, a straight line, right? That's not how you would ever probably get to the top of a mountain. It's always a bunch of zigzags. Sometimes you got to go down a little bit to be making progress. And again, that's why this approach and embracing more of a hybrid, where we're always balancing what's benefiting us with the results that we're getting, and what are we trying to do, and where are we trying to get to. And again, that's all about continuous improvement. It's never about just hitting some end state and we're done. Yeah.
I think back to an earlier course of yours, where you spoke to the value of kind of Kanban boards, of making that work visual, of being able to have those information radiators inside organizations, and connecting that to a previous organization I'd worked with, where we began adopting some of the practices of Kanban and putting the work that was knowledge work on this board. And a coworker crossed by and was just looking at the board of our team, seeing the work that was in progress. This was someone totally disconnected from that work. But in looking at those columns, just posed the question of how were we checking to make sure that the work was done? Like, how did we know that it was done, and that it was done to the satisfaction of the stakeholders? And looking at that had been a conversation, but to have somebody who came in with no knowledge of our processes, with no intimate knowledge of how this work got done. But that Kanban board made so starkly clear as you move through these phases, there is not a check, essentially this kind of quality check for is done. It struck me so much as just the purposefulness, and it struck me so much as just, this adopting some of these practices just allows for the team and folks to be able to kind of raise the bar of each other, to support each other and lift in that growth. I imagine you see that quite often with the clients you work with, where you just see a team come together and folks kind of lift each other in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when we're talking about things that it just makes information so much more readily available and transparent. And so somebody walking by and asking that type of a question, right, might spark something like, oh, well, maybe we would benefit from having some agreements on how work's moving from one state or, one column to the next. And I will say oftentimes that is something that will bring pretty good improvement, right? Because we can see, depending on how you're moving work across a board, there's a lot of times opportunities to just improve how you're using that technique. But what we also see is somebody walking by and asking that question, you're saying, oh, well, when we see something that is moving from our in development column to ready for testing or, in QA, then it's not just the code that's been written. If we're talking about a digital product, it's the code's been written, but any other things we need so testing can actually start and be executed, test data, identifying test cases, writing test scripts, whatever it is we need, that's all part of an agreement we've got so that when something is moved into that state, that column, ready for QA, somebody can pull that in and testing can start. It doesn't mean, now we're taking in more of a, even though we're an agile team, we're kind of taking a more traditional or waterfall approach where it's like, well, the development's done. I'm pushing it over into this next column and now you're ready for testing, and now the testing work's got to be done. And you share that with a person that's looking at your combo, and they're like, oh my gosh, we'd have never thought of it like that. So there's a lot of benefits to a team visualizing its workflow, both for the team and for others in the organization. Another situation might be that person walking by and saying, hey, it looks like you've got this quantity of work, could be a user or technical story, a backlog item. And I see it looks like you got this thing that's blocked. Yeah, but we have a dependency on that, right? So now you've just provided an opportunity for somebody very quickly to be like, hey, like we didn't know that was blocked. So maybe we need to start taking a look at how we can manage multiple Kanban boards in a way that if there are dependent items, there's items of risk, there's items where Chris's team and my team, we both need somebody from shared services. But if I don't get my work done, it's going to impact his work because, again, we have a natural ordering or some form of a dependency. Those are all things that we're able to start seeing real improvements come from.
And I remember just as you were saying there, I was struck by you actually kind of walked through in a previous course of yours at LinkedIn Learning that's available on the site, looking at kind of Agile in practice or Agile at work and kind of diving a bit deeper into user stories and actually following the kind of life cycle of a user story across a board.
You got a good memory.
Yeah.
So one of the techniques that again, it's like we can build on things, right? So it's like first thing, again, maybe we're a traditional or a predictive based approach team, but we're going to start using a Kanban board. And again, maybe that board's going to change depending on what phase we're in, or we're an agile team and we're going to again use a Kanban board. So one of the techniques to understand just how things are moving through our workflow is to follow some of that work from start to finish. And there's a lot of different ways that I provide training and coaching on this. But one is if you do a daily coordination meeting or daily stand-up, daily scrum, daily huddle, I don't know, lots of different ways to describe this, and we're using a Kanban board, take a screenshot of it, right? And it sounds crazy, but if you have a screenshot day over day, you can start to see these outliers, and it's much easier to see work that's gone forward, work that's gone backward, work that's waiting or delayed. And then you can start doing a little bit of analysis on that. And I mean deep analysis, you got to have a bunch of tools and this, that, and the other. we might find that in particular spaces of our requirements domain, our business domain, maybe we don't have the right level of access or feedback from some of our stakeholders. So we need to understand that's an area we can improve. Maybe we're seeing that there's a miscommunication in the requirements. And so again, we got to, no, that didn't meet the expectations. That's not what I wanted. So maybe we need to strengthen our definition of ready and have some examples of stories that were really good and, again, had the right level of information versus those that didn't. So by using some of these practices, and a Kanban board in particular, then we're able to start doing other things with that information that's being visualized. And again, it just really, I don't want to say it snowballs, but it's like it almost does. It's like, oh my gosh, now we're able to start seeing and doing some things that we might not have thought of before or really had no insight to before, all at a really low level of effort and a really, really, really small barrier to be able to set these things up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned your training. I imagine many folks here are already familiar with your work with Process Mentors, your work on LinkedIn that you post, the courses that you've taught on LinkedIn Learning. But I'm interested for those that might be new or less familiar with you, could you speak a little to those places where they could find more information about your work, your training, and the places in which you share your expertise?
Yeah, so the first place I'll say is go to the LinkedIn Learning Catalog. I've got courses out there now, everything from an introduction to discipline Agile, Agile at work on user stories, Agile's not just for software. I have one, top 10 mistakes in the project management space, that really focuses on becoming a value manager, right? A value delivery manager. And so it really takes a look at value stream management principles, all wrapped into some of the more common mistakes that we see that aren't attended to. In addition to that, so I am the founder of Process Mentors, and we do a fair amount of training in conjunction a lot of times with our consulting services. So processmentors.com is that site. And then End-to-End Flow is an end-to-end reference model and approach that takes you through value stream management all the way down to team level things. And that is a very comprehensive set of reference models where we can go from like a strategic objective in an organization using the factors for effective value stream management all the way down to something that's like a story, acceptance criteria, or tests. So those are, I would say, the three places. Oh, and if you follow me on LinkedIn or subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, I often write about these types of topics or have live streams on them.
Indeed. Yeah, that's how I first began working with you, and then I was very excited that we've been able to host you here. I had mentioned at the very beginning, but the space that we are in today is LinkedIn Studios in California. Joshua's just finished his most recent course, Hybrid Project Management, which you can expect a little later here in 2024, as well as the courses that he mentioned that he already has in our library. If those of you that aren't familiar with LinkedIn Learning, there are hundreds of courses produced every year from business spaces, soft skills, leadership skills, as well as technical courses in a wide variety of server languages, programming language, software engineering, project management, as well as creative courses from filmmaking, working with the Adobe Suite, and kind of many others. So you can often find ways to kind of support, to dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics that you'll find there. But obviously, first and foremost, to go to the expertise that Joshua has provided. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I want to thank Tony. Tony is the director. He's on the other side of the camera, so you can't see Tony, and Letitia, who's in one of the rooms, also monitoring this. So this set, and everybody else that was involved in putting the set together. So Tony and Chris had some conversations with me before the shoot was set up to be done, and this set was assembled specifically for the course. So this is called a practical stage versus being in like a green screen stage. And I can't say just how appreciative I am of not only the opportunity to do the course, but I mean just to have such an amazing studio set that was put together. It's just really cool. So yeah, thanks to everyone.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yep.